Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow. We're
Wow.
live.
Wow.
Wow.
You just snuck that right up on me. How are you?
Just doing fine. Doing fine. We are here. It's Brian and myself, and we have a guest who's going to join us extremely soon. And he's well known to longtime HF Pod listeners, so you'll have to stay tuned.
It's the best guest.
The best. Brian, how are you?
I'm okay, RJ. I've got I just pulled out spare ribs from the freezer. They're thawing out. Those are going to go in the oven and then they're going to go on the grill. We're going to move the TV outside and we're going to watch the Nuggets game and we're going to listen to some jams. It's just we're at the onset of a Friday night. I'm very excited about it.
That's awesome. And you're not going to any concerts tonight?
Not tonight. I've been let's say what's the word for it? Ryan Storm has accosted me. He has the Trey Trio.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, are you gonna? But you're not doing it.
I'm doing it Saturday, Sunday, not tonight.
Okay. They're playing 3 nights?
3 nights. Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
who even knew that? Who even knew that? Not me. But I knew that there was something happening this weekend. But I know that you were in trouble for not going tonight. So I hope you get out of trouble. Before we start, I want to tell you guys that we've been talking on this podcast about, well, actually, maybe it was just last week or maybe it was multiple weeks, but we have talked about the fact that there's nowhere where I could find all the live bait tracks that have been released, particularly in 2000, because I knew there were a bunch. And then this week I created a spreadsheet that lists out every live bait track by year. And it's a spreadsheet. I'll link to it in the show notes. I had posted about it on fish.net. I even separated out the mics, the hydrogen, the Week of Pogs. So, so Jonathan can go and listen to every I Am Hydrogen that was released on live bait starting in 1991. I debated whether to take everything off post 2000, like everything that's available on Live Fish, but I guess you might as well keep them on there, right? There's a lot, and it feels
Since
like
they
kind
go
of
through
it feels not fair that live bait tracks get taken up by things that have already been released, but I'm not the arbiter of this.
I was going to say, like, at least they do the remastering, which is nice, but what are your thoughts on getting like a 2017 track on a live bait when and I know that there's like a 1998 track that they could have found or a 95 track. What is your take on that?
I mean, I think they should. My take, which I assume is similar to every other Fish fan, is that every live bait track should only be things that have not already been released to the public.
Right. The only reason I think it's justifiable is that I think you're the same way. I'm a big defender of 3.0. I think that the last going on 15 years of post hiatus.
Yes. Brian's going to come back to us at the end of the sentence. All right. So while Brian's catching up, I'm going to tell you guys about one quick thing, which is if you're going to be at the MSG shows this August, on Sunday, August 6th, the day after the last MSG show, we are going to have, I think this is definitely happening. We're going to have an HF Pod 10th anniversary party, and it'll be in New York City. And I'm kind of finalizing the venue and all that. But save the date for August 6th, Sunday. If you're going to be in New York for the fish shows, or if you're going to be in New York generally, or if you're in the area, we're going to have some music. We're going to have a bunch of friends there, and it's going to be fun. All right. So Brian's going to join back again in a sec, but one of our friends on Twitter, Captain Incredible, talked a little bit about this show. So we're covering 3/3/2001 tab, and we'll get into the show, of course. But the Captain Incredible on Twitter said that it was a nicely polished basketball court style wood floor, dual level horseshoe shaped stands, no rear stage. And the soundboard was in the back center of the floor, and he was just behind the soundboard in front of the lower level bowl. This is part, of course, of this spring 2001 tour that Trey was on. And man, it was pretty intense. There were so many amazing shows. And this is just like Trey really just basically ripping. So It's gonna be fun to dive back into it. But hey Brian,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm here. I'm back. I'm gonna have a lot of words with Verizon Wireless after this recording. But
It's all good.
live TV, live show business, guys. It's all happening right
Here
now.
we are. You gotta improvise. I was just saying that this 3/3/2001, we got a couple Twitter comments from people who were there. So I was just kind of running through that. But we're in the middle of this really like kind of intense winter tour where there's a lot of going on here. I mean, these shows are raging. Trey is just like, I mean, he sounds really kind of incredible, but maybe we should talk, Brian, first about like 2001 generally. So obviously Fish stops right in October of 2000, and then they just like I guess everyone kind of goes their separate ways, but Trey, just a couple of months later is back. He's back on the road with the band, and this tab outfit here is pretty sweet. But he basically hits the road like 3 months after they break up.
Yeah, I feel a lot thinking about this and thinking about 2001 in general with regards to the Fish universe, because we spent the last two episodes talking about how the band sounded still inspired. Like, I think we both really liked aspects of the 99 and 2000 shows, and like I love aspects of 2000. It's been a year that's really grown on me as a listener, but you can kind of hear, especially listening to this, that there's a not necessarily a boredom, not necessarily he's tired, but there's like a need for something. Like, Trey is such an energetic, creative guy that um you know he needs a project that's got this like fire that's working really really quickly and working. There's an immediacy to it, and there's new ideas being thrown out, new perspectives, and stuff that's throwing him off, and he's got to figure his way back, back to like the center, and then how do we expand that again. And I feel like you hear almost immediately in this show that energetic, excited Trey that we were so used to in 93, 94, 95, 97, that wasn't gone in the 98, 99, 2000 shows that we covered, but there was definitely a need for a reset. Um, and you hear it. You hear this energy. You hear that Fish just broke up. Like, this is 6 months after the show we just talked about. And it's a completely different band and a completely different energy behind Trey. It's just absolutely wild to listen to.
Yeah, and also like, there it's interesting because so 99, well, first of all, let's just go back to 98 because 98 was the year that Trey did the some solo stuff in there was the higher ground, which was the 8 foot fluorescent tubes, which he talked about in Alive Again, and he's talked about elsewhere. And then in 99 there were these like I think pretty well regarded tab shows. There's like the 930 Club show that Jonathan has talked about. There's a bunch of stuff, but it's kind of like a mix of Trey acoustic and then the trio, right? So that's it's sort of like he's just getting used to being out on the road. But this 2000 like and then 2000, they were busy with Fish. So 2001, this like winter 2001 tour is really like the first time that not only is it post Fish, but it's also the first time that Trey's really going out on the road with a solo band for the first time. I mean, you could argue that he did that in 99, but that was kind of like those were kind of like little mini tours, I think, compared to what he did in 2001, which was like taking this new band out on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it almost in the same way that if you think about Fish, like 83, 84, technically Fish, but like Fish really begins in 1985 when Page joins, when so many foundational songs are written, and then going into 85 and 86, like you have that is the bedrock of who Fish would be and who they would become. I know that Trey played his solo projects in 98, 99. To me, winter 2001, this is the start of Tab. Like, this is where the history begins. This is where the sound really begins. This is where, and we're going to get into, that sense of, okay, I'm jamming pretty heavily with Fish. How do I jam with a bigger band? He's figuring that out in this tour in a way that is going to explode over the summer and is going to blow up even further in 2002, rein in a little bit in 2003 into this kind of like happy medium. But like this tour is where foundational songs are written for Tab that are going to be played for the next 20 years. Big jams are going to start to emerge in a way that um, allows Trey to have an improvisation expansion on the side, and that excitement that I think he was searching for is going to reemerge as well.
Well, thank you for that context. And speaking of excitement, it's time to welcome our special guest, the original OG co-host of the Helping Friendly podcast. It's Brad. What's up, Brad?
I'm
What
just
up?
an imposter.
Hi, friends. There's Shirley.
What up, dude?
Hey, Shirley.
Charles.
Hey, Charles.
RJ and Brian.
Hi, Dom.
Hello.
They just
Shirley's
got
Shirley.
home.
there.
All right, sorry. And I wanted to be on at the start, but of course.
But of course, that's how it
Working on
goes,
that.
man. But
Yeah.
we're happy to have you. We're just getting into this 2001 tour. And Brad, you were, I guess, early 2001. We were still in Columbus, and did you see any of these Tab shows in 2001? I don't think I saw any of them, but I'm not
I don't think
I'm
so.
not positive.
We graduated in June, right?
Yeah.
From Ohio State. And I don't recall. Very well could be.
I don't think I saw any. You didn't see any, right, Brian? Was this before? This was before you started seeing.
My
Trey
first
Tab,
show
right?
was summer 2001 Alpine. Yeah, my first show was summer 2001, so a few months after this tour. I was
Okay.
about 6 weeks away from receiving Bittersweet Motel for I was still getting Easter presents in 2001, which tells you a bit about my age at that point in time. I'd wake up and like, there'd be like a little present. Apparently the Easter Bunny still visits people in high school, but like it's a formative Easter, like he is risen and I get Trey in my life. I get Fish in my life. It was one of the most consequential Sunday mornings of my life.
I know Ryan Storm. I'm pretty sure Ryan is Jewish. Ryan, you're Jewish, right? But do you still get presents from your parents? I do want to know. I do want to know because I think Rob Storm is the kind of
Important
guy who would
question.
give you really awesome presents. And actually, I kind of want to join Ryan Storm's family because his parents are awesome. And I'm just
The family affair for sure.
it's a family affair. And I'm sorry that I don't know why we're talking about that, but I just had to. All right. So Brad, we're talking about the fact that this is a few months after Fish broke up and Trey goes out in this winter tour with horns and the whole thing. And man, it's so wild because Meg's not here to do the whole thing, but I just think like this era reminds me so much of like what Trey talked about in depth in Alive Again, which was like wanting to have an open jazz jam. I mean, Surrender to the Air, I think sort of like was a precursor in a way, but like in these shows, the horns and everything are like, everything's just so like open. It's like a crazy jazz jam, there's no like structure to it really. It's just like people soloing and Trey fucking ripping. It's just super
There's a lot
fun.
of riffing by the horns, which in this show, I haven't listened to any other shows from the tour. I just listened to this morning actually, but there's a lot of riffing by the horns, which doesn't necessarily happen nowadays. I don't think with the horns. I assumed Trey didn't have the little quiet mic to their earpieces, right, where he would tell them like when to switch keys and notes.
Yeah,
I don't know. He does that now. The past few years that I've seen him, he does that with the mic underneath his mic, or he just taps a pedal or whatever and tells them when they're going to E. That definitely wasn't happening here.
He was much more of a conductor during this period. He was like turning around and like he had hand signals to them. And I remember like when I saw them at Alpine that summer, like he had like defined, that like this is where we're going to. This is what I want like the breakdown to be. It's just gonna be Russ and the horns, or it's just gonna be horns and Tony. But yeah, to your point, RJ, I mean, it feels like there's an energy here that feels both structured, which is what Fish was not by the end of 1.0. But then there's also that openness that you're talking about, and like Push On Till the Day is almost like the perfect that to me, like, it opens the show. That is the constant Tab song in my head, and like
Yeah.
that in the wee hours, the way I feel towards the end of set one, and then we'll get into the jams in set two. But like you have that mix between songs like Mellow Mood, in the Mozambique, Sign Sealed Deliver,
Yeah.
like these very upbeat. You have Nothing But an E Thing that will become Pebbles and Marbles. Like you have compositions that are coming along with this that he wasn't focusing on with Fish. He was basically saying like that type of written material is coming to Tab, but I also want to bring the jamming aspect to Tab. It's a very, very cool mix.
Yeah, there's some cool covers and in the first set, Sign Seal Deliver. But back to the Push On Till the Day opener, I was kind of expecting no horns, and I was like, what was this going to sound like? And then the horns came in, and I was like, yes, okay, the familiar place, but still kind of raw and new. When did the Red album come out? The
spring 2002. So these are all of those
right
songs
before them.
being written, and then he's basically going to take the best and record them and give you that. Like that self-titled Trey album is just like the perfect embodiment of who he was in the early 2000s. I love it.
I love
that.
Side
note, I remember I used to listen to it all the time, and my grandmother was in the car one time, and I made her listen to it. And she was pleasantly surprised. It was such a nice. I still think about it when I listen to it today. It was like it's a album that can cover a lot of ground as far as preferences go.
Yeah, and the album cover has given way to so many great memes that it's really like just kind of it's unending. But before we get into this show, just real quick, just going kind of reverse chronological from the end of the year, because the end of the year basically was Oysterhead for like most of the fall, and then before that was the summer, which you saw, Brian. I listened to that Alpine show with the awesome Medeski sit-ins like throughout the whole show. But there's that extended jam on Burlap Second Pumps with just Trey and Medeski, and it really is like a unique sonic experience that everyone should check out. But did the lineup change between the winter tour and the summer tour? I can never keep track of all of these different iterations of Tab, but
the very first show of 2001, if that's what you're talking about, was the Troy with the Vermont Youth Orchestra.
Yeah.
So there had to. I doubt all of them. Maybe, I don't know. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Let's look here.
No. Yeah, I think you're right. But and then I think once they picked up in Boston in February, because they had three horns, right? But was that throughout the entire tour?
That's throughout the entire 2001 year.
Sextet. So that's
I think that the only addition in the summer was Medeski for a few shows because Ray was out.
Okay. All right. So Brad, we got to go back to this 3/3/2001. There's also my second choice was the Tower Theater in Upper Darby, which is about 5 minutes from here. And I had lunch with our friend Craig today, old Chillwig, who was at the Tower Theater show. And there's so many epic shows this February and March, but
nice.
This Push On to the Day opener from 3/3, it's such a great. It's kind of like the ultimate Tab song, It's like
it's to me
makes you feel
the Tab song.
Yeah, and the jam is great.
Can I just ask?
On top of it, yeah.
Did you walk away with any good jazz recs from Craig, or any goose critiques? Anything?
I'm not going to talk about any of his critiques, of which there were many. But
privilege.
Yeah, exactly. He's an Osiris advisor, so it's all very extremely confidential. But we did talk a lot about music, and we sat outside here. It was a wonderful afternoon.
Are the skies clear finally?
The skies are clear. It looks blue, and then there are white clouds, which seems normal. I just feel like Trey is really like pushing this with just, I don't know, this Push On to the Day. He was really like extending it just with guitar solos, which again, like we keep like contrasting Tab now with Tab then, but it's pretty remarkable that he's just leading the band like with his guitar playing.
Well, I think I was surprised at the number of like 3 to 5 minute songs in this show because you don't get that a ton
Mhm.
in Tab these days. Most songs are 8 to 10 minutes, and they're not going to go beyond 12. You know, so I thought that was a contrast to from then and now. But there's a ton. There's also a ton of songs in this set list, which I guess you do get a lot with Tab nowadays. But
Yeah, I mean, this contrasts where they're going to go over the summer. I mean, this to me feels like it's Trey talked about this, I think, in Alive Again, how Tab during this era was playing Fish venues and were basically carrying they were booking Fish amphitheaters just 1 year after Fish went on hiatus and were expected to carry the entire organization. Like I saw Tab at Alpine Valley, which is just unheard of nowadays. He
Right.
can't fill that, but like he could fill Alpine Valley in summer 2001 because people were like, well, we would have gone and seen Fish, but we're just going to go see Tab now. Now there's more options. But I think to your point in terms of like the songwriting and what I'm trying to get at is like there's such a fast evolution for Tab where they go from this period of 20 to 25 songs in a show, a few jams, to by the end of the summer tour, there's multiple 30, 40, 50-minute jam segments, 60-minute 3 songs, put together just back to back 20-minute jams. He's not there yet with this band. He's just introducing these songs, and we find him at a really interesting point here with the tour is 2 shows from 1 show from being completed, 2 shows before he takes a pretty significant break before the summer tour. But one thing that hit me about Push On Till the Day was there's like a minimal slow build in the solo that reminded me in a sense of like 2000 Fish, and it felt like he still was in that mindset, but he's trying to apply that to Tab at this point in time. And so I don't know, it was just like one thing that really like stuck out early on from a jamming standpoint is that he's still playing like not like chordal style. He's not trying to like melt your face at this point in time. He's still in that like minimalist mindset, and he's trying to utilize the horns. By the summer, there will be a little bit more energy there, but it was just an interesting introduction to the show.
I mean, so I want to know like what's going through Trey's head at this point, because Brian, what you said earlier before Brad joined was like it's like really, really high energy. It feels very fresh. It feels very high energy. And I was actually just talking to Craig about this at lunch that like, I think one of the things, and we've talked about this on the show before, I think one of the things that Fish is kind of like working their way through right now is like, there hasn't been a lot of new material in the past 2 years, 3 years, really. Like Sci-Fi Soldier was material. I wouldn't even really consider that material, to be honest. I just don't think it like feeds into their I don't think that it like feeds into their like improv and like I'm talking like thinking about when No Man and Mercury and Fuego and these songs that like give them new palettes to kind of jam around. It just feels like this is like a whole different kind of Trey here, and it feels totally different from Fall 2000. Brian, like you said, it's much less like groove oriented. It's much more Trey like forward, and I don't know. It's really fun to listen to. I think I agree with you, Brad. Like the first set was sort of like there's a lot of songs, a lot of singing, and Jen is like, Jen is on the backup vocals and making a lot of these songs like, sound a lot cooler, I think.
Yeah, I think there's even riffing with the lyrics. Maybe I don't know. Like those are the original. The original song had sort of the background or a lot of different background vocals that you don't hear on the self-titled album or what we hear now.
It's interesting as well. You talk about just like mentioning modern Fish. Early on, the performance of It Makes No Difference, a song I was not until listening to this show. I haven't this was my first time really diving into the winter 2001 tour. I've always spent a lot of time in summer 2001. But Trey playing It Makes No Difference. I always associated that song with the Austin City Limits performance, like 3 weeks after Coventry, where he like is just losing it on stage. And like, as a listener, I was like losing it watching it. But Trey's trying to sing high in 2001 versus 2021. It's amazing to think about how much his voice has improved and how much he has gotten to a space where like he can sing with a range that I just don't think he was even practicing at this point in time. So he's trying to hit these Rick Danko high notes, and it's just not coming through as much. But it is wild to hear this song like 5 months after Fish goes on hiatus. Like it clearly is a song that feels like you're reaching out to friends and you're kind of longing for something that once was there. That is, it makes no difference what I actually feel at this point in time. But having that like early on in this show, in between Tube Top Flop, like a great early Tab song, and Mozambique, one of the classic initial Tab songs. I don't know. It's just there's a lot going on here emotionally that I don't feel like you were getting in late 2000 Fish. Do you guys hear that?
I mean, they just started. I think the first time they played that song that makes no difference is February, just a few weeks before that. So they debuted it. It's still raw. It's still kind of emotional, and yeah, I do think there's some emotion for Trey knowing that Fish tour isn't right after this Tab tour, and he's giving it his all because we know he's hyperactive and has to do that.
Brian, I hadn't really thought about the makes no difference in the Austin City Limits, which obviously immediately makes me think of the Last Waltz version. It's like it's all pretty heavy. So anyone who listened back to this show, and if you want to pretend that you weren't confused, that's fine. But Nothing But an E Thing, I totally forgot about this as like that it was like Pebbles and Marble. I was like listening to it and I was like, because we were texting about the fact that Waves and a couple other songs that would come out later like were played by Tab, and something I talked to Tom about, which we should talk about. But I was like, wait, they played Pebbles and Marbles, and then I looked and then I like read about the song and I was like, wow, I totally forgot that was like a thing that really only through the summer of 2001, and then it
9 times total.
But it's sort of a weird, I mean, it sounds weird now because it became a different song that we know, but there's a lot of and then it got rearranged right for another album, but kind of like it's a throwback to like when Pieces of Fluffhead would be their own songs, or like different jams ended up in different places, but it was sort of like I was like, wait, what the hell is this? And then I had to like refresh my memory on it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that listening to like The Way I Feel, Sidewalks of San Francisco, these songs that feel like they were almost stand-ins for like just jamming exercises, and to just loosen the band up and allow them to just kind of play without too much pressure, and because so many of these songs are charted out and everyone knows their part, but also then like how do we just allow the band to kind of experiment. And I Nothing But an E Thing is slightly different in that sense because it is so composed, and it ultimately would become Pebbles. And my thought with that was kind of also this sense of what can Trey not do with Fish, and they haven't written a composition since Gaiuti at this point. Like the late 90s don't feature a new composition coming out. It's all kind of just a song that's going to lead into a jam, or it's stuff off the Sicket disc that's more experimental in nature. Here, like you start to see, and I remember this early part of the 2000s, Trey getting back into writing out song charts and writing out the Vermont Youth Orchestra stuff, and writing everything that just 3 years later at Bonnaroo, he's going to lead orchestra. He's going to conduct an orchestra on stage, and he's going to put out Seis de Mayo, and all this stuff that is more orchestral in nature, that kind of harkens back to what he was doing with Ernie Stiers in the mid 80s. Like Nothing But an E Thing feels so strangely it's going to become a Fish song, but at the time it feels like this is a reawakening in his brain about another way that he writes music. And it almost makes me think, I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Like, do you think
It's awesome.
Fish 99 and Fish 2000 is so experimental and so jam heavy? Do you think that there was a part of him that felt almost dissatisfied with the ability to write out charts and really test himself in this way? Do you think that that's why part of like some of these songs emerge?
I mean, I guess just based on my last interview with Trey, which was for Undermine, I mean, I think the fact that his mind goes to 92, 93, like, there were parts of that Undermine interview that we had to cut out just because of, it was just too long because he talks
Yeah.
forever if you just ask one question. But he was like playing one of the live releases from 92 from his phone into the Zoom, like, and reading the set list and like describing how amazing it was to look back on and see that they were playing 20, 30 originals that were all composed and like I think he looks back on that era of playing everything from Big Black Furry Creatures from Mars to You Enjoy Myself and Divided Sky all in one show as like a huge accomplishment, and I think different than what anyone else was doing. So, if that's like his mind goes to that era. So probably, I think he now, maybe it's because of his sobriety, but I think he views the late 97, through 99 period as like, it was just like a party that they were participating in. I don't know how much love
Sure.
he has for that music, it's a good question, but I feel like,
It's a really good question. It's a
and
good
this
point
kind of got him
too.
back.
It's like almost cyclical in that, like early '80s or mid '80s when he was writing all the Junta stuff, and then the early '90s when there's a bunch of new fresh stuff, and then they became rock stars, as I think he even would admit, right? And they were partying in between shows and partying at the shows in '97 to '99, and then maybe he, I don't know, has a realization or whatever in around now when he's like, well, let's write some more stuff and compose some more stuff, and then he wrote Hands on a Hard Body.
Well, it's funny because I'm thinking about it because, like, the next few years for him are going to be very hard. There's no real getting around that. But it is interesting. I'm just kind of thinking about this in the moment, how prolific and how creative he is, even amidst a period of personal struggle. That these songs, all his work from an orchestral side, he's going to make Shine. He's going to form like 5 different bands and disassemble them and take parts and put them in different bands, and like everything leading up to late 2006. He's going to constantly be tinkering with what is happening with the Trey Anastasio band, in quotes. And so he's restless, he's relentless as well. He's just trying to figure out something that works. And it doesn't feel like he's trying to figure out how to make the next fish, but it does sound like he has a sound and an idea in his head, and he's trying to figure out how to make that all work. And it's wild to think that he could look at 97 to 2000, this era that is so revered by the fan base, and to your point, Brad, almost dismiss it as like, well, we were just participating in a party where I was my most creative, was on either end of that when I was writing a ton of music that was ultimately revolutionary. I don't know. It's a lot of interpretations of what he could be feeling, but I'm just kind of
One more thing back to
listening to the
RJ's
show.
interview.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. One more thing back to RJ's interview was that he was like, we were basically mimicking James Brown in '97, right? So he really wasn't composing or conducting.
It's a really good point.
Maybe conducting the band,
Yeah.
but like they were just, again, having fun and doing things that we all loved, obviously. Destroying.
Yeah.
How do we get to like a minimal groove and just ride that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we had to cut a couple other things in that interview, including he talked about writing some of these songs, including Push On Till the Day. And I think he described, which is not that surprising, that Push On Till the Day was written like from his perspective, sitting on the bus, the Tab bus, which must have been, I mean, it came out that year, right? They started playing it in early 2001, so it must have been from the 99 2000 Tab parties, but it's all like his narrative of what's happening at the Tab show. So it's interesting, there's this mix of like, these songs are serious party songs, but at the same time there's a lot of composition and direction, as you said earlier, Brad, like with the horns. But it's really fun to go back to. I don't listen to this stuff really at all, and I feel like I should, because this is, there's some really, really good shit here. Can we get live fish? Can we get some archival releases of some of these tab shows.
I mean, this would be the time.
I mean-
when he's out with Fishman, right? Like now is the time. to draw
Brian
attention.
is so flummoxed by this.
I'm exasperated by the fact that all of 2001 and 2002 tab is not on Live Fish already. I have no understanding why it's not there. Like having it on re-listen is a huge improvement over jam streams. And if you out there are listening and you don't realize that all of Trey's archive is on re-listen now, go check it out. Cause like, holy crap, I've got like 45 recommendations at the end of this podcast, of which I'm going to list every one and force RJ to end the podcast while I'm in mid recommendation. There are so many incredible jams that like will blow your like, and I say this lovingly, blow your feeble little mind. You have no idea what you're missing if you haven't heard like these summer 2001 Trey jams. Oh my God. And they should be out there. They should be in soundboard quality. It's amazing stuff.
It really is. So I guess that and to Glenn Russell's point, like lots of people can party and mimic James Brown, but not many can write and play Divided Sky and and etc. And I do think that's, I mean, we talked about this a lot, but I do think that's why Trey loves, King Gizzard and Billy Strings and Goose. I think he sees the songs even more than anything in those artists that he's been kind of into recently. All right. Hey Stella, maybe we should take a quick break and then talk about set 2. And for those of you watching the live video, that was the break. Thank you. And thanks to those of you listening for supporting us. Brian.
Is this now the King Gizzard part of the show? Because I'm happy to just like talk about how Trey got his face melted on Wednesday night.
Thought we were here for Goose.
I can do that too, man. I can do that as well.
This is a Goose. Is this a Goose podcast now? I feel like I think there was a review or a comment or something on internet or one of our podcast reviews that was like, is this turning into a Goose podcast? Because we like talked about Goose once.
We need HF Pod merch that's just HF Pod, like the logo in a farmhouse, and just says, welcome, this is a Goose Pod. Like 6 people will get it, but it'll be really funny.
Take my money. Take my money.
You think actually now that we've seen Fishman wearing the Taylor Swift in a fish logo. Trey was wearing the King Giz in a fish logo. Can we put HF Pod in a fish logo? Should we have done that from the beginning?
Man.
That should have been the original.
I know. Wait, Brad, so a little history, right? RJ was like, at your old job, you're like, I don't know, computer person, like your
designer,
guy, made the original logo.
Yeah, designer Tim Lewis. He's amazing.
Like, here it is, perfect.
You used work time to create a podcast logo too. I had our IT guy create the original BTP logo. This is amazing.
Yeah, we owe our company's back pay probably.
Wait, can I? You're about to make a point, but can I ask you a question? Because Brad, you just alluded to something. Tomorrow is the 10-year anniversary, right? Of the start of the podcast.
Was it the 10th? I think it probably was.
It was the 10th or the 13th. I don't know.
It was June 2013.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, and this is just coming from a fan who wrote you guys every day asking you to let me on the podcast, and you did twice, and then you were like, okay, nobody else wants to host it, so you can do this. Like it was the best job offer I've ever received in my entire life.
To our defense, you were in Korea, and I was.
This is true. but I have a vivid memory of waking up one day to go for a run and searching in my podcasts, like whatever the iTunes library at that point, for fish podcasts. And I wanted to see if there was anything out there. And there was one that was out there that I knew of that I didn't like listening to, and I won't say anything about them. And then another one popped up, and it was the Helping Friendly podcast. And there were 2 episodes, and I was like, okay, are these guys actually podcasting like 2 episodes? But then I realized it was like, a week and a half away. So I was like, okay, clearly they have some schedule. But I listened to them and I was like, this is the fish podcast for me. This is it. And for the rest of that year, like, you guys put out like 40 episodes in your first year. It was like serious fucking work.
Yeah.
Like you guys were churning them out. And I was just listening constantly while I was running overseas. It was the absolute best.
Brad, editing was not why you were brought to the pod.
It still isn't. It still is. I couldn't. I fuck it. Jesus, take me a fucking week.
I think it did take you a week once, and I was like, I'll just do it. Well, June 10th, 2013 was a Tuesday, so that it's plausible that was the day.
Yeah,
Well,
that makes sense. I think we
happy-
chose
happy
like
fucking
every other
birthday.
Tuesday or something.
Yeah, thank you.
Because we're
And
like,
you know
oh,
what's
Yeah.
you know what's funny though? I remember the first like 10 episodes of HF Pod are on archive.org because our first podcast hosting company, remember Podomatic?
Podomatic.
I do.
we had to pay based on the number of episodes. So like at some point it was like, well, I guess we have to take some episodes off. So we like took the first 10 off and put them on archive.org because we ran because the internet didn't have enough space. So what are you gonna do now? At this point we have
congressionalarchive.org.
exactly. I mean, I don't know how many episodes we've done, 500, 1,000, who knows? But those first 10 are on archive.org if you want to look at them. Actually, according to Apple Podcasts, there's 549, which is a lot.
That's
That's a good
crazy.
amount.
Okay, so maybe it's tomorrow. So happy anniversary to us. Brad, before you join, I mentioned save the date, August 6th. It's a Sunday. We're going to be in New York City. We're going to be hanging out. So it's happening. It's happening. Guys, I have the confession to make. All right, Burlap Sack and Pumps is great. This is not a really jammed out version, but Will It Go Round in Circles is my favorite Tab cover, like by far. But it might also be my favorite Tab song. Like it's so fun and swinging, and like, I mean, the guitar is amazing. The lyrics are fun. It's just such a fun song. I feel like, I don't know if this is real, but I feel like songs like Blaze On and like there are songs that I feel like came later that like kind of are imitating this style a little bit in a good way, not in like a copying way, but like it's like a fun party song that's just like, it's just so much fun. Fucking love this song. That's all.
It is uniquely bouncy, which I think is
Yeah.
a Tab staple, right? All of their really good songs that I want to listen to are I'd call them bouncy, and a lot of it has to do with Tony, right? R.I.P. And his such stable, but yet it's almost dominating, even though it's not dynamic.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah. Straightforward, but like on top of it. And also, sorry, Brian, they haven't played it. Tab hasn't played it since 2020. So since before the pandemic. So let's get this back on the map. Maybe the Trey Trio will play it this weekend.
Maybe. Although I hope that there are under 15 songs played at each show. That is my dream. But this song, yeah, it was played pretty sporadically through 2006, and then there's a big gap from 12/30/06 to 5/31/2019, and then to your point, it was last played in 2020. It kind of like when I think about the origins of Tab, it's like a little bit of late night New Orleans, a little bit of Motown, a little bit of orchestral, a little bit of King Sunny Ade, a little bit of Sun Ra. Like it's got all of that like mixed together, and a lot of that sounds akin to Fish, but is not really the areas that Fish like hangs out in. And you talk about the idea of it being bubbly, Brad. Like that's so spot on. Like I feel like the eternal image of Trey at a Tab show is him like sweating, hair everywhere, giant smile on his face, like horns going wild. Whereas like Fish is always a little bit darker, a little bit more like mercurial and a little bit weirder. It almost has like more of like a King Crimson type feel to it. Will Go Round in Circles like sounds like a Tab song. I do just want to go back one song though, because Burlap Sack and Pumps, you mentioned this earlier. The version with Medeski, that is why I'm a Fish fan. Like that specific 15-minute jam. I got handed a goo ball at set break, and I had no idea what a goo ball was when I was at my first Tab show. I was 16 years old, and I was like, "What is this?" They're like, "It's granola and pot." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I ate a bunch of it. Probably too much for like my feet. Like I think I just smoked pot for the first or second time like 2 days before, and I just left my body and like was just taken by the music. And I remember following that being like whatever I just felt there, like that lack of self-consciousness, that like oneness with music and with everybody and the world around, like I want that over and over and over and over again. And like that is why I keep coming back to Fish. So like I have a very special relationship with Burlap Sack and Palms. Hearing it here, it's very tight. It's got that hypnotic groove. It kind of has like a staccato cutoff at the end. It's a really cool version, but like it's going to build over the next couple of years with Tab, and it's going to become one of like the main jam vehicles. It's just wild to hear it here. But oh man, just listening to this 2001 Trey sound, like it takes me back to that's like my origins. I love it.
RJ mentioned his favorite Fish song. I think Brian, you've said yours now too, but I gotta say I don't know if it's my favorite, but my vote to be different is Drifting. And this Drifting is like,
oh yeah,
this Drifting is like very raw and new, and it's a little bit like the lyrics seem a little bit off the cuff. It clearly hasn't been fine tuned.
Yeah.
Right. It's a really cool listen.
In terms of Tab songs, you're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite songs all ever.
That's
no.
That's a good call. There is a lot of like, it's almost like scatting or something, right?
yeah.
In terms of the lyrics, like it's not
They're
laid
like,
down.
Scatting is a good point. They're just kind of like thoughts. You should say kind of like some, like short thoughts.
Yeah, it sounds very much like there's I don't know. There's a lot in those lyrics that are like, it just feels very I don't know. It's almost like they like cleaned it up a little bit, in the current version. But I like, this is much more raw, like you said, Brad. It's kind of like, it's got like a very unhurried and raw kind of feel to it. It's really cool. And you're right. And it's like 10 minutes long, right? There's like some jamming in there, and it's just, they're not in a hurry, which just sounds really cool.
It's almost a move because like Drifting's like a faux ballad, and it's got these lyrics that like kind of give you the sense. Like it's interesting to hear it at this point because it always has sounded to me like Trey talking about going through something challenging and now finding clarity. And it's kind of tough to listen to that in 2001, knowing with hindsight what's ahead. But like musically, anyone who wants to log off after I say what I'm going to say, I totally understand. But it kind of, it's a goose move where it's a ballad that jams, and most driftings are in the 9 to 12 minute range, where there's not like a type 2 jam, but there's enough of like this kind of reminds me of the jam in the middle of the Push On Till the Day from earlier in the show, where it's kind of sublime, it's kind of quiet, it builds towards this peak. He takes his time with it, which sometimes with Fish ballads they get right to the emotional part of it without giving it space, and I wish sometimes that they would expand and jam a little bit on those ballads.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Brad, thanks for bringing up Drifting. It's a good one here. I just want to go to the Sand, but is there anything else to talk about before we get to the Sand?
I just want to shout out Sidewalks of San Francisco and Either Sunday. Those are just like two classic old Tab songs. Like Sidewalks of San Francisco has some huge versions from the summer. Either Sunday is one of my favorite album closers of all time. Like it feels like you've reached the end. It's like an exhale, a vibe to it. Singing about Sunday morning and like just like the joy of that. So I don't have much to say outside of that. I just want to at least have those noted on the board as we're talking about this show.
They're on the board, dude. They're on the board. Brad.
Gotta go in order.
Brad, this Sand is ridiculous. It's like you texted me growling guitar after I wrote growling guitar in my notes. So like clearly that was a similar feel, but like 10 minutes into this Sand, there's like the swirling effects, there's the growling guitar, and then there's like this horn line that sounds improvised, but they're in sync with each other, that just gets you like moving. It's like a really pretty incredible 4 or 5 minutes, and I don't know, it's just incredible.
I'll jump in before Brian says smart things, and that is, I think the horns, like 4 or 5 minutes in, are the precursor. They're almost the leader to that like growling effect, or those like that like awesome loop that they kind of chase for the last 12 minutes of the song or whatever. And like you said, maybe it's composed, or maybe it's improvised, but I really think the horns start the jam after the lyrics, and then the back end of the composed song.
Yeah, I didn't have growl, but I had swirl. So we're all kind of in that Venn diagram of hearing specific sounds and
Dirty as well.
documenting them
See, I
properly.
said dirty as well.
Dirty as well. I wrote in all caps, just like energy and groove out the gates. Like Sand and First Tube are wild because those are the two songs that Gotta Jaboo, I guess, as well. Those are the songs that straddle Fish and Tab. Like they felt like Tab songs when they became Fish songs, but they also like feel like Fish songs when you're hearing them with Tab. I mean, I remember when I saw Tab and the encore with First Tube, I was like, I finally saw a Fish song. Holy shit. But like Sand, has this just like, it works perfectly with like the vibe of Tab. It works perfectly with where Fish was jamming 5 months earlier. But that horns around like 11 minutes, and the swells that are coming out of Trey's guitar, like it sounds like shoegaze. It almost feels like you can see 6 to 12 months into the future of where Tab is going to go, and how the jams are going to become a little bit more dystopian. The jams are going to take on more noise. They're going to take on more of a wall of sound approach to them. And he's going to kind of push into like the limits of what this band can do as it becomes an octet, as it, this, he talks in Alive Again about, he always heard Tab as this like freight train that's just like moving down the tracks and nothing can stop it. It's just like this collection of people just moving really, really quickly. And you hear the origins of that sound in this Sand that is going to add something else to the Motown, New Orleans, Sun Ra type of thing that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Brad was right. Brian's going to say smart stuff about this. You're right.
One more thing, Tony.
Yeah.
Right. He's got a little bit of a different tone and effect with the bass line. It dominates. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good, and it always brings you back to home base or whatever you want to say. Even though the jams are incredible and out there.
It's like there's like the occasional bass bomb in there from Tony that just like, it's like,
yeah,
rock
just
style.
realized not too long ago that Sonos now plays re-listen. I think it's been a few months, maybe a year. I don't know. So I was listening to it in my house, and I thought there was like a teenager out front with like bass in their car, right? But it was during the Sand Jam. But it was Tony. I was like, wow,
yeah. He was the perfect bassist for this. I mean, for all of Tab, but like especially for this era, just his ability to commit to a solid groove, play, play stuff that I think Mike probably took issue with, like playing the same Sand riff over and over and over again for 17 minutes. Tony kind of found like a sense of pride in that, and there was almost a duty to just like keeping the groove as solid as possible. And you just this band isn't this band without Tony.
Yeah. And he helped with some of these songs, right? Sand and First Tube in particular.
Right.
Like he was there.
Sack and Pumps, I think too.
Yeah, he was there like when those were written. So they're kind of written for him, for us, by us, as it were. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
Fubu?
Can we talk about the misprint on the re-listen tracking that tracks the
quadraphonic toppling?
It's just like this song just like emerges and drops in places that it doesn't actually exist. I got so excited, and even fast forward to this when I listened to this show, I just listened in order, and it's really just like the Cypress loop that you hear, like that, like whatever the 3 a.m. loop that Trey came up with that ultimately led into Quadrophonic Toppling. It's like some of the creepiest music he's ever made in real time.
Mhm.
Kind of some haunting background, like a whisper, and then it fades away. It's really more just like an encore break than anything. But I don't want to say I was disappointed. I more just like laughed at the person whoever tracked this. It was humorous to me, but I was also like, man, I really wanted to hear what Trey playing Quadrophonic Toppling in 2001 sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the same.
Sounds.
I don't think
What do you think?
I don't think it's
There's a lot in here.
well, so I just want to say quickly, Brian, to your point, it reminds me of like the sorry to do this again to everybody, but it reminds me of Goose playing Dripfield and then like leaving the stage and then coming back on and finishing Dripfield. That's like what this, kind of like it was just sort of like a soundscape sort of thing. But I was gonna ask you guys the same thing. Maybe I could just be like bad at this stuff, but like I don't really care about like acoustic songs. Like I don't know. Is that just me? Am I just like a bad fan?
There's not much jamming that goes on, RJ, and I think you're here for the jams. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm here for the
There is
jams.
not much jamming in the acoustic song. It's so true. Maybe that's my thing. Brian, what's your take?
I think the commentary is the best part. Because like his story about why he wants to play Strawberry Fields Forever, that he heard it recently, he realized how beautiful it was when it was stripped down and wanted to highlight how beautiful it is without the quote stuff on it. That's fascinating to me. That's fascinating to me. Like that is amazing to me to hear Trey listen to music the same way that like I listen to music and be like, did you hear this version that like did this? And someone who doesn't care that much about music is probably going to go back and listen and be like, well, it's just an acoustic Strawberry Fields. And to that person's point, it's just an acoustic Strawberry Fields. Like Trey, this kind of gets back to like what I was talking about with like Trey's voice on It Makes No Difference. I want to hear like 2023 Trey try to do this because he can sing these notes with more resonance and it would be prettier now. It's a little rough around the edges. And it kind of speaks to because he talks about it when he goes into Back on the Train, that he's been listening to the anthology series. And it's wild to think of Trey leaving behind his band the same way that the Beatles left themselves behind. And he's going back and listening to all these Beatles songs and realizing how perfect they are as he's setting off on his own. And there's like a weird parallel there. But his fascination with like the Beatles production versus just the songs that were written, I think is the best part of this encore break. Aside from, we'll get into it when we talk about the last two songs, but I'm on the same page with you. Like it felt special, especially in the moment, because you didn't get this at Phish shows, but I think it's worn off a little bit. Like every Tab show I've seen has had an acoustic encore, and it's nice to hear like Mountains in the Mist just stripped down, but it's also like, to Brad's point, we all just want to hear the jams.
Acoustic Army was never something I was looking for on the tape that we got in the mail. You know what I mean? I mean, it's fun and it's good.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
You know.
It's a good point. It's like, okay, well, I guess this is the end of this set. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. But now, and Trey, to be fair, has like built the storytelling into a whole minor industry with his solo acoustic shows. It's basically just him
Story
telling
time with
stories.
Troy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with like songs in between. I mean, it's fucking amazing. All right, Brian, we are at the end, but I intuit that you have things to say about the end of this encore.
I do. Well, first and foremost, continuing with the theme of mislabeling songs, but I learned while listening to this, this is Radon Balloon is labeled as Waves, which, as Trey tells the story, he wrote this on a boat in the British Virgin Islands with Tony, and he introduces it as Waves, which is interesting because Waves is going to actually be a Phish song in 15 months. But there's a couple moments that I really like. he thanks the audience for their patience, being open to so much new music. There was a comment, in the chat today about how there was a hunger for Fish, and you've got to imagine going into 2001, there were a lot of people that were like, they're going to play this year, right? They're not going to take a full year off. And so when Trey is playing these shows and he's not playing any Fish songs, that's a lot for people to take in. So he was really gracious and really thankful that people showed up and stayed for the full show. Says that the next show is the last show of the tour, and it just struck me that he said, hopefully we can play again soon. Who knows where the band is going to go at this point in time. Obviously they're going to play this huge summer tour, fall tour, big summer and fall in 2002, 2003 before it ultimately comes back. But he also, before At the Gazebo, he says that this song was written a year prior, and this struck me. He was waiting for the right band to play it with, and he pauses and says, "This is the right band." And it kind of makes me think about everything we were talking about with like Trey's compositions, because At the Gazebo, Nothing But Anything, even a song like Last Tube, Push On Till the Day has like parts where like charts are written out. Like these are songs where he's really thinking about like, how do I write this song out in a way that a horn section, multiple drummers can play along with, and then jump off into potential jam. And he knows at this point in time, Fish is not that band. Fish is not going to play a song like Fish just doesn't have the parts to play At the Gazebo. And it really struck me listening to it how much he is realizing in the moment he made the right decision to go off on this new band, that he made the right decision to put Fish on a break, channel his creativity in a completely different direction. And you hear it out of like a song like At the Gazebo is just like heart-achingly beautiful. I love it.
I agree. It's a really nice ending, and I'm glad I listened to it. But again, I don't think the acoustic Trey band is what we're having the podcast about. But what remind me again? So Fish comes back the end of 2002, right? But like between
New Year's Eve
now
2002,
and
yeah.
right between now and 12/31/02, they play winter, summer, fall 2001, and they
Yeah.
play how many tours in 2002? Two?
Summer, fall, and then Fish comes back, but Tab still does like a small summer tour. It's like a 10-show run in late May, early June, and then
Nice.
I don't believe that Tab tours again in fall 2003, but
Sounds right.
I don't believe so.
Great though. I mean, what a great way to fill that almost 2-year block, of time with four
bunch of Trey shows.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And there's a lot that happens in Tab. I mean, between now and the end of 2002, just in terms of the songs. And I think there was like some crazy partying going on and some evolutions in the band. And, I think it was like pretty wild time to be part of that scene. But, all's well that ends well, guys, including this episode. Brad, as the most special guest, thank you. Oh, Brian, please go.
You can, I just posted this in the comments. Okay,
I'll put
here
this
it is.
on the screen.
You're just gonna put it on the screen. Can I just pull out a few of these to highlight?
I'll
went
put
on
these in the show notes also, but send them to me so I can put them in the show notes.
Absolutely. I went on a Trey bender over the last week, and I listened to just like nonstop 2001 Trey.
As you're not
craziness.
going to the Trey show tonight, it's so ironic.
I know it's crazy. I'm full of irony, but King Gizzard, they were so Wednesday night. But I just want to highlight a few choice jam recommendations for if anyone out there is like, this was an interesting conversation. I think these guys know like 30% of what they're talking about. Maybe I should listen to other jams and see what
Nobody.
it's about.
Nobody.
The 224 Jabu, the 720 Last Tube.
Wait, are you really going through all these?
Not everyone. I'm just going through a few choice ones.
Okay.
The 720
Okay,
Last
okay.
Tube, which 2020, 2001. Do you know where this is from?
No, Riverport.
The Riverport Amphitheater. Do you know what happened at the Riverport Amphitheater almost 3 years to the day prior?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. The
Yeah, you
Riverport
do.
Gin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this
Of
just
course.
3 years
You kidding
later,
me?
a
Okay.
23-minute last tube to open the show. Trey had to know something like that. Probably
Don't fuck
didn't.
with me, Brian.
God
Damn it.
Trey knows his history,
the
too.
726 the 726 Mr. Completely, which is 48 minutes long. The
48 minutes.
727 Burlap Sack and Pumps, which is 48 minutes, which is 30 minutes long. The 729 Alive Again, which is 22 minutes plus Money Love and Change is 32 minutes. And then here's the last one. This is just amazing stuff. 731 Alive Again into Last Tube is 50 minutes of jamming to close out set 1. And then they open set 2 with Jaboo into a jam to go around circle for 50 minutes of jamming. Just insane exploration that's going to happen. There's even more. I'm not going to list them all to you, but there's so much out there. Again, listen, check it out. Shapiro, let's get stuff released in Soundboard, huh?
This is a Brian, you buffered a tiny bit there, but will you send me the full list so I can put it in the show notes, because this is very important. And thank you.
I'll send you the full list.
Okay, I feel like I picture Brian has like all of these jams on a board with like the yarn in between them. It's like, and then
Pointing to him like,
and then Quantigy, and then they went into Quantigy. Brad, thank you for joining us. Everybody, thanks for listening. We're going to be back next week. We're going to talk about a non-Trey show from 2002. And hopefully we'll see Brad again. Brad has an open invite. It's basically we hold a chair at the table for Brad every week. And you're welcome to come back anytime, Brad.
I appreciate it, man.
It was fun. And appropriate that, according to Brian, this is exactly 10 years to the day, or tomorrow will be. If you're listening on June 10th, then it'll be 10 years to the day. So thank you for your support. All right, everybody. See you soon.